Historia Canadiana is recorded on the unceded lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka First Nation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a cultural history of Canada. Okay, go for it, Mac. You're already going to interrupt me. Go. Say your stupid
Sinners
joke.
2, Sinners 2, but the vampires are Quebecois.
Yay!
It would work though.
It would very much work. I'm down. Yes, pitch that. Let's make this
Ryan
happen,
Coogler,
folks.
take my phone call.
Please.
Hey, I want your blood, tabarnak.
Mix it in with my poutine. Esti.
Fuck me. It's good for the gravy.
Makes it a bit thicker.
Fuck, we're stupid. We are stupid.
What a great way to start this episode that has nothing to do with what we just...
Yeah. Don't worry, folks. Patrick's gonna cut this.
No, I'm not. No.
Oh God, all right.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, where it's 8 a.m. on a Saturday for one person and 10 p.m.
And
on a
it's
Sunday
10
for
p.m.
another.
And it's been a long day for me.
So this is the show where two tired teachers talk about things in our past. It's fun. That's it.
Yeah, Canadian history, baby, through the lens of culture. Shout out to my student that I know is going to probably end up listening to this episode,
It's the
who is
student's
slowly
name.
become. I'm not saying that.
So shout out to my boy that I don't know
Yeah,
the name of.
that he's obsessed with you. He
It's
genuinely
cool.
is.
That's cool. I'll start a Cameo account just for that guy.
Please don't. He's going to use it to bully me.
Okay. You just gave me more ammunition.
All right, Anonymous Quagga. What are we talking about today?
So, um, many months ago, we started off an episode on William Lyon Mackenzie King.
Back when this show had a regular schedule.
Look, I'm hoping to kick back up on the regular schedule. It's just, I just happen to have stuff when on a
Oh, I'm the
regular
same.
schedule.
I'm part of the problem too.
Yeah, yeah. It's not because we don't like doing the show, not at all. It's just life gets in the way sometimes. Yeah. So
Does it
anyway,
ever?
months ago, we did a first episode on William Lyon Mackenzie King, and because he's one of our longest standing prime ministers, if not the longest lasting prime minister, we
And
decided to
often
split it up
cited
into
as one
two.
of the best.
Well, today we're going to finally determine that because we're
Dun dun
concluding
dun.
that episode on William Lyon Mackenzie King.
So we're doing his entire.
We're doing the back half
So
from World
everything
War
of him
II.
during the war and after the war.
Yeah, I decided to make like a long episode on it
All
because it
right.
just
We'll
felt
see
kind
how
of
long
weird
it
to do.
goes.
Yeah, we'll see. Because a lot of the war, it can be kind of condensed into him flip-flopping. There you go. Just saved us like 5 years worth of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh God. But yeah, when we first, um, yeah, I guess met William Lyon Mackenzie King, we had gone up to 1935.
Mhm.
And do you remember like much of what we had talked about in that first episode? Like what kind of picture we got of Mackenzie King?
Yeah, it was essentially like he was again, he was very into the occult
Yeah,
was part of it.
definitely.
It was also very much like he was fine as a prime minister at the time. It was the Great Depression and like nobody was doing super well as a world
Yeah,
leader.
yeah,
But we both agreed that like if we tried to rank him, he would actually be a bit low
yeah,
because
exactly.
this wasn't his time.
Right. And that's kind of, I guess, what the people felt and why we stopped in 1935, because that's when
He got knocked
Bennett,
out of office.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Bennett took over. We did a whole episode on him.
Bennett kind of
And
fell apart.
yeah,
Was
Bennett
Bennett
didn't
the
do
Bennett
much with it.
mobile?
Yeah, exactly. The Bennett buggy.
The Monopoly man.
Yeah. Although Mackenzie King doesn't look too dissimilar to a Monopoly man
No,
either.
that's true.
This is this is the period of just an endless succession of Monopoly men harumphing at each other. This is peak that, right, in Canadian politics. And we're by the end of King's tenure, we're going to slowly be getting out of that,
Yeah,
where it's still going to be men harumphing at each other, except they look slightly less like the Monopoly man. Yeah, like,
nice.
that's pretty much what we're gearing up towards. Which
Yes.
we can debate the merits of that later. Um, okay, so where I wanted to start for this particular episode was pretty much where we left off, right? what was happening in the mid 1930s is something that we actually discussed in a previous episode, which is
Hmm.
the Spanish Civil War, right? Um, Not a great time for anyone in Spain, right? Um, Obviously, because civil wars are never fun.
Ah,
Um,
yes, good old Spain. You know, the
Go.
rain, it falls in the plain in Spain.
Keep going. Cook. Cook.
That's about all I know.
That's good. Yep. Um,
Barcelona, Madrid.
Yay, great. Picasso.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as we discussed, like the Spanish Civil War was kind of a much like the what was happening in the Pacific theater. It was kind of a, I guess, test run for what we were going to see in World War II. Right, fascism was on the rise in Spain, and people
With
were,
the rain and the plane
of course, yeah, the rain, the plane, and all of that.
and the fascism.
Yeah, and the fascism.
Well, if it's
And
fascism, then it's the trains and the planes in
good.
Spain.
Yeah, yeah. Keep going. Cook.
I'm sorry, I'm so tired.
That's good. I think that's the peak time when you should record a podcast is when you're dead tired and can't think straight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but technically, Canada didn't get involved in the Spanish Civil War like it would in World War II. But we still sent, well, some volunteers still actually did go over, right? And that's where our last episode kind of focused on, right? It was the 1,300 Canadian volunteers
Yeah.
that went over to fight fascism with various factions of what was broadly called the Republicans, right? Which basically
Mm.
included anything from anarchists to socialists to communists to liberals. And of course, you can expect that that got along swimmingly, right? That whole thing. And then you wonder why fascists won. Um, so yeah,
I thought fascism was dead, Patrick. Are you saying fascism is still alive today?
it was certainly in Spain. I got a message actually from someone saying that it was irresponsible to call what was happening in the US fascist. And I could see why you would say that, but it has certainly fascist tendencies. And I'll just leave it at that.
It's been noted multiple times that Donald Trump looked up to Adolf Hitler.
And again, is it an entirely fascist state? No, but I think it's if it
It's
keeps
on the
going on
way.
this, yep.
Also, like, it's not dangerous for us to say because, like, this is our platform and it's inherently political.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also don't care. I don't get paid for this. I don't make money off of this thing.
You get paid $10 a month.
Yeah, and then we split that, so I get like five.
Yeah, great. Well, no, your half is 10. Anyway, it
Mm.
doesn't matter. So funny enough, right, for a brigade that's called the Mackenzie Papineau Brigade, right, that was fighting for freedom, which was an important cause in 1937, as
And
important
2025.
and 2025 and 1837, which is the Mackenzie that they were named after. Um, it's kind of odd that the Mackenzie King government in 1937 decided to make it illegal to fight for foreign armies,
Yeah,
even in a brigade that was named after his grandfather. So I kind of wanted to start off with that snapshot of Mackenzie King.
nice.
Right, this is where
Hmm.
he's at in 1937, just before World War II kicks off. He's like, no, I'm not actually going to allow people to fight for a
Mm.
ostensibly good cause abroad. No, that's not acceptable. Um, so not a great start for our boy Mackenzie King.
Yeah,
Um, Instead, he did that year attend the coronation of George VI, and then went on to visit Adolf Hitler. Okay? So, priorities, ladies and gentlemen.
yes.
And this episode, which I'm going to elaborate a little bit on, is often used as ammunition to demonstrate or to make the argument that King had somewhat of a fascistic tendency, right? Or that he was sympathetic to it. And I don't know, you can maybe disagree. I don't think that's quite fair to say. Um, I think
I
he was,
think
yeah, go ahead.
I think it's a reality of the time that Adolf Hitler was a world leader.
Exactly.
And you
Yeah.
can't kind of ignore the world leader of, and also nobody knew what was going on in Germany because it was just so awful.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing World War II. I just did World War II with my students. We talked about sort of what was going on in Germany, and it's like, listen, man, everything was awful everywhere. The Great Depression hit everywhere. Germany was hit especially hard, and nobody had time to really like take a look over and see what was going on with those funny
Yeah.
little guys with the little mustaches.
But and as far as I know, like the rhetoric was there, but I don't think the camps had formally started by then, had they? Like the ghettos, yes,
No.
but not the death camps per se. Yeah.
And even then, people didn't quite know what was going on in the ghettos or anything at all. Because, like, again, it was so, like, everything was still recovering. Everything was still
Mhm.
kind of bad. So, what was the difference between one ghetto to another?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's hard. We tend to forget this with time, right? And we tend to, for example, blame a lot of the Soviet Union for making a pact, for example, with Hitler and Nazi Germany. But a lot of the Western countries had done that as well, right? Britain had done that. France had done that.
Yeah.
There were other countries that had done that as well that I'm escaping off the top of my head. But mostly because everyone kind of wanted to avoid war, right? This is
Again,
diplomacy. Yes, exactly.
everyone wanted to avoid World War II.
Yeah, shocker. It was kind of inevitable that it was going to explode in that in another like
Yeah.
fiery
I'm
ball of
not saying,
imperialism. But
I'm not, like, I'm not saying it was a good thing. I still collectively think they handled things poorly. But
mhm,
I'm not going to say that the motivation was fascism.
exactly. Yeah.
They were not fascist curious, I don't think. They were more, oh shit, oh god, we just murdered each other in the millions.
Mhm.
Let's not do that again, please, oh god.
And people are still dying in the hundreds of thousands. Um,
Yeah.
so no, that's not great. Um, so basically, right, the series of events is that he was there working with the London Imperial Conference, which happened every so often. That was the same time as the coronation. And, you know, he consulted, as he would, his best mediums, his best soothsayers in England. And then he headed for Berlin, right, for a secret talk with Hitler, who incidentally also was someone who was interested in the occult. So
Yes.
that might be
Well
an interesting
documented. It's been the plot of many comic books, Hitler's obsession with stealing magical artifacts.
fuck. It's the basic premise of Indiana Jones.
Season 2 of DC's Legends of Tomorrow. And the Spear of Destiny, the Lance of Longinus.
That's great. Um, See, these are the connections that we like to make on the show, not like deep,
Yes.
like high cultural connections. The Spear
Well,
of
I think
Destiny
it's
and like, yeah, go ahead.
it speaks to the world's very much still very real requirement as well of easy solutions for complex problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, we make fun of them for haha occult, but we just say the same thing today, but about AI and
Hmm.
traveling to space,
Yeah.
as if these like scientific, might as well be magical missions are going to solve all the world's problems.
Fuck, we've been doing it with the market forever, right? The market will
Yeah,
resolve itself, right? And people,
the market will solve itself.
like, you see it in the language also. People call Warren Buffett the Oracle. And it's like, what are you doing if not claiming that he's magical in some way, shape, or form, right?
No, the man just reads a lot and he knows what he's talking about. He's not an oracle.
He's just a billionaire. It's fine. Um, so
Yeah.
the conversation actually is kind of nebulous between King and Hitler, right? So a lot of it is based on reconstructions or hearsay or what people have stated in interviews years after, right? So some historians will tell us that King used this opportunity to warn Hitler that Canada would join on Britain's side, right? If Germany actually went to war with Britain. Um, but this is not something that King would himself mention to a
Yeah.
journalist shortly after, right? So it would seem like an important detail to kind of gloss over. Okay. But again, years later, um, King would tell journalist Bruce Hutchinson that he reckoned that Hitler was, quote, a simple sort of peasant with ambitions that did not go far beyond pre-First World War borders of Germany, right?
Mm.
So, so that's kind of like his public-facing persona, right? About it. It's like, no, I warned Hitler, and I think he's a lowly man, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Which, great, great bit of PR right there. Um, However, we know from his diaries and what he said in them and what he wrote in them that apparently he admired Hitler for his devotion to his mother and for his spiritualism.
Right.
So, and he compared Hitler to Joan of Arc, which is a really, really odd comparison to make.
That's a yikes from me, man.
Yeah.
The only worst way he could say was Moses.
Yay. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's exactly that. And yeah, he specifically, if you're thinking like, oh, Joan of Arc because he's like a strong person or whatever, no, specifically because he saw Hitler as a deliverer of his people. Right? So adding a double layer of yikes on that one.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's again adding a little bit of ammunition to the flirting with fascism gun that we see throughout.
Yeah.
Um, but nevertheless, right, King kind of publicly and generally privately considered himself to be a pacifist and an appeaser. And a lot of what he was seeing around him, despite his attempts at appeasement, were not obviously indicative of a time of upcoming peace. So people were obviously aware that war was coming, right?
Mm.
Especially if we were continuing on the path that we were. Um, and so because of this, despite his like pacifism, they still managed to set aside about $33 million for defense spending um, for that budget. And
Mm.
his speech and remarks kind of reflected that, right? Where he was trying to stay on both sides of the issue. And he was like, yeah, obviously we'd like to defend Britain, but we don't really want to go to war, but we're also setting aside unheard of amounts of money in our history for defense spending. So we'll see where that goes. Um, Again, not exactly dissimilar to what we've seen from Mackenzie King in our first episode. Just kind of playing
Not too
both sides.
dissimilar from what we've seen in our fucking current politics, not gonna lie.
This might ring of a certain Mark Carney right here. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Fighting literally like we have an axis of fascism rearing its head up again in the world.
Yep. Mark Carney being like, no, we can still trade with the US. It's fine. Everything's
Woohoo.
okay. Not everything's okay, but still, yeah. The most we can expect is like a half-assed meme of elbows up. So that's really great, guys. We're really pumping that whole resistance thing right there. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, this is, however, as we're entering into World War II, as you mentioned at the start of the episode, this is probably where a lot of historians, especially liberal-minded historians, really think that King shined. Right, is from the period of 39 to 45 during the war. Right, where as a
Mhm.
politician, you may not agree with the politics that he represented, but that as a politician, he showed his ability and his deftness to actually engage with that world. Right.
Mhm.
And even people who are not more liberally minded um, would admit that King handled the war pretty well, all things considered, and that much more importantly, he was able to hold the country together, right? Which is
Yes.
pretty much all you want to do during a war, right? Just kind of steer the ship in a way that it doesn't sink entirely.
Legitimately, that's all you need to do. Come out on the other side. Okay.
As unscathed as you possibly can, and with some people still standing. If you did that,
And
you're a
Canada
success.
did that pretty well.
Exactly, right? Which is why
Canada came out of
people
the war with a pretty good opinion for most people.
exactly. But naturally, there is something that he needs to deal with during the war, and that's not just fascism. Um, it's Quebec, um, because that's never going to go away.
Ew.
Uh, so a lot of Anglo Canadians were like, "Yes, let's support Britain."
Jesus Christ.
A lot of Quebecers were not so inclined to do that, right? Um, and so in one of the books that I read, he defined it really well, where it was like Quebecers like to see themselves as Canada's Irish, which is to say a large Catholic enclave with a threatened language and no great urge to fight under any version of the Union Jack.
This is why they need vampires.
Yay! But yes, um, so yeah, that's you can kind of think of it on those terms as well. So that's an added layer of difficulty
Mhm.
for King in that moment, right? Um, And especially in these early days, he would appeal to Quebec by saying that he would not wage this war with conscripted troops, right? If war were to occur, no conscription would happen.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing. Um,
Conscription.
although he did hold out for as long as he possibly could, though. We will say
Right.
that. And arguably, by the time that he actually put it into place, it was no longer necessary, but we'll get to that. Um, and yeah, so I have actually, as we tend to do, um, did you see the actual first link that I posted in the notes? The one with,
Yes, collections.
yeah,
Ta-da! We opened the collections.
yeah. So as Mac opens the link to this first cartoon, um, which I like to do during our Prime Minister episodes,
You gotta read the cartoons at the time.
yeah, they're so funny. Not only are they hilarious, so in order to
That's
really
so good.
ensure his success, right, as a wartime minister or as a potential wartime prime minister, King resorted to one of his favorite tricks, which is to call an election to really ensure his popularity, right? Because nothing seems better for a prime minister if just before a moment of great crisis you have the support of your population for the next 4 to 5 years, right?
Hmm.
It's what Trudeau tried to do in COVID times, not as successfully as King, but it's what was attempted. Um, so, Mac, how would you describe this particular cartoon that I put in and that will be linked in the show notes of this episode?
It's beauty contest time again, and we've got all the members of the political parties wearing sashes like they're the goddamn Miss America, but it's still they've got women's bodies but male heads.
I know, it's the freakiest shit.
And the conservative one does not look happy,
No, everyone's just owning up to it. Like
except for the conservatives.
the Mackenzie King one, which is the liberals, he's
Yeah.
just flaunting it. He has the duck face going. He looks awesome.
CCF looks proud and dignified, and New Democracy is so happy to be there.
I know, I know. Um, although I think, yeah, I actually think by then the joke is that New Democracy is taking CCF's place, right?
Yeah.
Because the NDP is the same thing as the CCF. They just rebranded. So I think part of the joke
Yeah.
is that CCF is on its way out because it's kind of old. And I think the New Democracy one there is supposed to be Tommy Douglas. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Um, but yeah, just great stuff. What
Hmm.
does this tell
It
you
was,
about the perception of the election at the time, right?
no, it was fake. Like it was not a real election. Nobody gave a shit.
Or at least they took it as
Gee,
seriously as a pageant. Yeah.
I wonder if we've ever seen a prime minister just decide to call an election in the time of a national crisis.
Hmm.
It feels like a bit of a disease running through our country.
Right around the time that he would also rebrand himself as kind of a cool guy with a COVID beard. Hmm.
Yeah. Oh,
Still
just
see that
what? I
today, right?
wonder. I wonder.
I'm dunking on Trudeau, but you saw that with Poilievre also during the election where he rebranded himself as like a cool, hip, young guy without the
Yeah.
glasses.
Oh, it's the strategic elections that kill me.
Oh, they're great.
At least you say what you will about the US, but at least like no, you have to have an election right now. No sooner, no later.
Yeah, yeah. I do like that some of the people in the crowd, some of the voters, are not actually looking
Yeah.
at the pageant. They're just looking at each other and just being like, "Yeah, whatever."
One is being made to look at the pageant. Somebody's
Yeah,
grabbing his chin, be like, no, look at this.
exactly. So yeah, I think that's a really good indication that people were somewhat taking it. You know, it is technically an election that's important, but people were had other things to on their mind, right? We were
Things
just
to
coming out
do.
of the depression, and the war was so they were just looking for someone who could actually take them into there. And the conservatives had failed recently, so let's go with the liberals, right?
Yep.
Um, so the conservative leader that you see in that cartoon is a man called Robert Mannion, who was basically the right hand man of friend of the show Arthur Meehan, who listeners will
Friend of the
remember.
show, Arthur Meehan. The man we we've ripped apart a fair bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine. He's dead. Who cares? Right? Just so he was basically one of his minions, I guess you would call it, or acting ministers that was basically had the same ideas as Mian and was would basically try to run for the conservative platform, and it didn't work, right?
Wah
Apparently,
wah.
yeah, apparently he didn't even use the term conservative in the campaign at all, right? Like because people were just not responding well to that idea at that time. Okay? Um, which you tried, coward, but you tried. And yeah, the Tories only managed to win 39 seats in that election, and basically King not only had the rest of Canada but Quebec as well. Right, so
Wow,
huge win
there's
for
eight
him.
pages to this document.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to like skip through some of the stuff because I know it's going to be a longer one.
No worries.
Once we get into World War II, it's going to be a bit of a breeze.
It's gonna
Um,
be we're gonna just rapid fire.
exactly. Okay, so basically in 1939, war explodes. Everyone knows the story, right?
Yep.
Um, and Canadian ground forces were immediately sent out, right? Or almost immediately sent out by 1940. We had people part of the Allied troops who got to the continent. We had Canadian ground forces in Newfoundland, the Caribbean, Iceland, right? Even Hong Kong,
Yeah.
right? So we were kind of all over the place. Technically, Newfoundland was not a part of Canada at the time, so we were like in another country, formally speaking, right? Um, and we would kind of, as an army, become what a lot of people would call an amazing, right, industrial military machine during the war, right?
Yeah.
Um, right. They actually participated actively, and people.
By the end of World War II, we had the third strongest navy and the fifth largest air force, if I remember correctly.
I think
And
so.
if it's
Yep.
not that, it's flipped the other way around.
Yeah.
We were really Canada's really good when it comes to specialized stuff.
Exactly.
Our special forces, our snipers, and who all this everything else are some of the best in the world. The one thing we don't have is manpower. We do not have the numbers to field a large army, but we can make really nice boats and really great planes and all that other kind of stuff.
Exactly. Um, and I'm sure we'll keep that up going forward.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Disrepair or what?
yep. But despite this, right, as is evidenced by the second cartoon that I put up, people felt that Mackenzie King's government would always act in like half measures, right?
Hmm.
And that's quite literally just what you see in the depiction, right? Just putting up a wall against an oncoming tide of war, but the wall is only halfway there, right?
Yeah.
So people not necessarily feeling that um, this is going to
Secure,
be, and
safe.
yeah, secure, safe, anything that's going to actually um, help anyone in the long run, right? So we needed to go further. And this is where we get what I wanted to get to as like the core of our discussion about the war, which is to say conscription, right? This is
Yes.
where that main debate comes in. Okay. Do you remember what that whole conversation looked like when we talked about it in World War One?
Oh God. It was like it's
I'm asking
it's
you because I want to
Quebecois.
take a drink. Yeah.
It's Quebecois. It's always Quebec. Oh no, there's a problem in Canadian politics. It's Quebec. Unless it's the 21st century, and then the problem becomes it's Alberta.
Okay. Kind of relegated to the like
Quebec is
the
not the
West.
problem child anymore.
No, exactly. Um, so we did continue for the first years of the war without conscription, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the main criticism for this, right, was that we needed more men to be sent, right, and not enough volunteers were actually going. Um, Now, whether or not this is true, again, historians have kind of debated this over time as to whether or not conscription would actually change the outcome of the war.
Yeah.
In the end, it's probably a little bit of a mix, like anything, right? Like we did send quite a few men to the front,
Yeah.
um, and if conscription had um, been imposed earlier, from what I've read, a lot of people think that it wouldn't have necessarily made it so that the war ended earlier, right? It would have maybe helped the people while the war was going on, but it wouldn't have necessarily changed the timeline that
Yeah.
much. But still, it was a big debate in Canada. And in 1942 specifically, King decided that they needed a national plebiscite on conscription. They were like, okay, we're going to answer this once and for all.
Yeah, we kind of have to.
And he was going to tell the nation that he was still adamantly opposed to conscription on a personal level, but that the situation might become desperate enough that it was necessary.
Right.
Um, and this is where we get the phrase that he's best known for, and that's associated with my final cartoon. No, sorry, second to last cartoon, um, which is conscription if necessary, but not necessarily conscription. Right?
Right.
So this phrase would come to be associated with him, although funny enough, he actually lifted it from a journalist. So kind of a bit of a plagiarism thing going on here, or at least misattribution. Um, so yeah, the cartoon that I put in is actually a contemporary one. Um,
Mm.
and he imagines conscription, but instead he says scalawag. A scalawag if necessary, but not necessarily a scalawag, thus pointing to his legacy of like flip-flopping
Hmm.
like sometimes. Um, so basically, the point of the plebiscite was not to actually um, make a final decision, but he wanted to, in numbers, show that most of Canada had support for this idea, right? He knew out of hand that Quebec would reject it, right? But he
Hmm.
still wanted like that the majority of Canadians demonstrated support, right?
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately for him, one of his major ministers in Quebec, a man called Ernest Lapointe, um, had actually died in the meantime. And so he was left trying to scramble for any kind of support in Quebec.
Yeah.
And it
Which was going to be hard in the first place.
was going to be hard in the first place, but he actually manages to pull it off. And it's going to set up the rest of the Liberal Party's future, basically. Because, and tell me if you recognize this name, who he chooses to phone in is a corporation lawyer called Louis S. Saint Laurent, right?
Mm.
Does that name ring a bell for you by any chance?
Vaguely.
So I guess you'll wait till the end of the episode to find out who that is, right?
Well, I can just Google it.
You can just Google it, but you can also just wait an hour.
Please, I'm a millennial. We don't wait.
That's true. Um,
Oh, he becomes prime minister.
yeah, there you go. He takes up the mantle after him. Um, so this is where Saint Laurent comes into the picture, right?
Hmm.
He knew he was like an English speaking bilingual, like he was bilingual, but he was living in Quebec. He supported conscription, that kind of stuff, and he made a minister of justice, right? And thanks to Saint Laurent's work, he was actually able to keep his Quebec caucus close to the chest, right, and on side. Um, Enough so that the actual discussion of a plebiscite went to the House, right?
Hmm.
And the actual question is interesting to unpack. And it goes something like this. Are you in favor of releasing the government from any obligation arising out of any past commitments restricting the methods of raising men for military service?
I always love the way they word this shit. It's not, can we conscript it? Hey,
Mm-hmm.
will you like give us permission to do this thing you don't like?
Yeah.
Please, pretty please.
Notably, conscription is not mentioned as a word in that question. Right?
Shocker.
In a time where like a lot of people would have maybe been confused by the question or um, I
Just
think it's
have
a
low literacy.
yeah, I think it's a notable omission, right? Did
Mm,
it change the outcome? I don't know, but it is interesting to consider, right?
yeah.
Um, and I like the use of the term also releasing the government as if you're like shackled by the people, right? So it gives the ownness of the decision back to the people, so to speak. It's like it's up to you at the end of the day,
Hmm.
right? Like my name may be king, but I'm not a monarch, right? At the end of the day, it's all on you guys, right? you people are the ones in charge, right?
Hmm.
So I like that as a nice little bit of politicking right there that I thought was kind of cool. Um, and yeah, it actually paid off, right? The English-speaking provinces voted 80% in favor of conscription, right?
Hmm.
The Quebec vote was considerably lower, of course, and ultimately disappointing for King. Um, and 73% of Quebec voted against overseas conscription, right?
Hmm.
Thus enacting, right, Laurier's nightmare of a divided country, right? Almost exactly the same amount of people who voted in favor of conscription in English Canada voted against it in French Canada,
Hmm.
right? So, not a great look, but overall, it is a positive vote, right? Which, because Quebec is not a sovereign nation, right?
Yep.
That's all they need, right? They needed a majority in
Are
the
you saying
entirety of the
Quebec should be
country.
a sovereign nation?
No, I'm just saying that it isn't.
You heard it here first, folks. Patty thinks Quebec should be a sovereign nation. He is a separatist,
Yep, that's it. Separation
as
for
reported by Fox News.
I think every single province should be separated from itself, and that Canada should no longer exist as an institution. We
Same
should
with the
all
USA. No more United States of America, just
50
50
different
different states.
countries,
Yes.
and here we should have 13 different countries. And now,
All the
actually, more
territories just become
all the
countries.
territories just become countries, or just one big country. That's up to them.
The territory.
The territories, and
Territory. No the. Just territory.
every indigenous nation is also its own country now.
Fuck me. Really going for gold here today,
Yeah,
aren't
yeah,
you?
yeah.
Going
Just
for gold for ways to piss off Elise Bouchard.
yeah, checking all the boxes. Yeah, anyone who wants a nation can have one. Go for it. I don't care. Right? It's just going to be
Turn
a
your
land.
backyard into a nation. Who
Yeah,
cares?
it's going to be a land of micronations. Yeah, I'm down for that. It's actually apparently quite easy to get a micronation. Um,
Oh, 100%.
yeah.
Because it
Anyway,
doesn't do anything.
no, no. I think you need to get like the approval of one other country or something like that. Anyway,
You
shall we
just get
start our?
another micronation.
Yeah. Should we get another? Should we start our own micronation, Mac?
I'll start one and then I'll give you permission to start your own.
Nice, cool. Okay, let's do this. A nation of one. um, okay, so basically, with the results of this question of this plebiscite, they introduced a bill that was called the National Resources Mobilization Act. Notably, again, not called a conscription act. But it did give the government permission to conscript soldiers abroad, right? Which is called Bill 80. And as if the crisis needed some kind of like cosmic comedic relief, our good old buddy Arthur Meehan um, arose from his near grave like status, right? Just before the plebiscite was actually called. And he basically went on a tirade against King just because, right? Because it was his job as opposition to actually like take him down as much as possible. Um, and basically, King did not take it. And this is really funny. He basically laid into Meehan as hard as he could, right? Apparently, he was like pounding into furniture with his fist. He was calling Meehan a fascist, right? Just going absolutely ham on him. Like in the House of Commons, right? This is happening, just absolutely tearing him down, and saying that the old Anglophile was destroying the countries, and I couldn't find them.
Nothing
Um,
gets your blood boiling like a rival, man.
it's so funny, and I couldn't find them online, and I'm sad about that. But apparently, his diaries invented new levels of description of insulting descriptions for this man, right? Like he was just
Hmm.
it went beyond the House of Commons. He wrote pages of like just insulting tracts against Meehan in his diaries, and that's hilarious to me. He was just so petty. Oh God. Um, But yeah, I don't know. Before we move on from the conscription thing, do you have anything that you wanted to kind of add about this? Right. We'll come back to it in passing, but was there anything that you
About the
wanted to like,
conscription, or
yeah, or like how it got into play?
I
Because
mean,
we'll come
it's
back to it,
just
but
the draft, as it's colloquially known,
mhm,
is just a common thing. It always will be. And
yeah,
yeah, it's one thing to say it's because Quebec and oh, we want to avoid blah blah blah.
mhm,
But the reality of conscriptions and drafts is because not everybody gets drafted equally.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so if you are the lower class, less educated population of Quebecers, odds are
Yep.
you're going to be the. It's the same problem that people like minority groups like Black Caucus and Latin American
Hmm.
populations have with drafts is that they're always the ones getting conscripted and they can't pull the I'm studying card to get out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that it's that System of a Down song. Why do they always send the poor?
Yeah, so like Quebec very much has reason to be angry with this one.
Yeah, especially at the time, right? Like systematically um, under, yeah, systematically poorer than a lot of
Mm.
countries, right? We were still in the Maurice Duplessis era, after all. So, yeah, that must have been a fascinating. I didn't look up anything about any meetings between King and Duplessis, but that must have been a fascinating encounter if it happened, which I'm sure it did. Um, yeah, I should have looked it up, but I didn't. Um, so, just as a kind of like counterbalance to this whole talk of war, it is important to note that a lot of what we identify with the Canadian social sphere, right, and social programs really kickstarted in King's time, right?
Yeah.
I think we mentioned this in part one, but it bears repeating here. Um,
Yeah.
Mostly because it's easy to pass these things when you're centralizing power for the purposes of a war effort, right? A strong central government is needed for war. And so King's vision of social programs for those in need, right, could also be passed in the same token. Um, and so part of the um, part of the things that you start seeing, right, is kind of a thinking through of what a post-war society would be like, right?
Hmm.
So addressing what is inevitably going to be a coming housing crisis that always happens after World War One, after World Wars, the handling of veterans affairs, right,
Hmm.
which would lead to pensions, for example, or employment insurance, um, a greater watch over fair employment practices. All of these would be developed in the 1940s. Right?
Yeah.
Now, ironically, as one of the historians I read said, it is funny that King, who really hated the American style laissez faire capitalism, right, that just was left unchecked, he really hated that. And yet, as a lot of historians noted, he also, in this time, increasingly tied Canada's economy and defense to that same um, American style future, right? Which is a bit of irony. Um, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, it's just, it's the realities of the time, right? You kind of have to get with the
Pick a
program.
side.
Yeah, you have to pick a side. And
If you don't pick capitalism, you're a dirty, dirty commie.
well, exactly. And he didn't want to be labeled as a communist.
Because they're
So
disgusting and horrible and awful, right,
exactly.
Patrick?
Yes, they all are.
You're a dirty. We all are. Excuse me. Don't
Yes.
try and get out of it now, okay?
No, I'm not. That's right. We all stink. We want to share toothbrushes. That's exactly it. Yep. Yep.
You
Yep.
want to
Yep. Yep.
use your
Yep.
toothbrushes to wash the floors and your mouths.
Yep. Everyone to the gulag.
Da.
Oh God. Um, so yeah, he actually managed to get, for example, federal responsibility for unemployment insurance and so on and so forth, right? So
Mm.
all of this would be developed as an extension of war measures, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it was started specifically for veterans, um, but then veterans' families and then Canadians, right? That kind of, or as many Canadians as possible, right? So it kind of extended from that, which again logically makes sense, right? The people who were in need of support were the veterans, right? They often didn't have like a stable home.
Uh,
They were lacking stable income. They were traumatized from the engine of war that they had just gone through, right? So the logic is sound, right? Of providing some kind of insurance for them, or some kind of like national health scheme, for example, which is also something that was planned. Um, so all of this kind of inevitably comes out of the Second World War. Um,
yeah.
hell, during this period, you also see the Dominion government actually being more engaged in the idea that people are entitled to unions, right? Certified unions, and they instructed manufacturers to engage in collective bargaining, right? So, you know, we made a joke about socialism, but this is something that a lot of more labor-focused ideas um, to take importantly. Um, okay, so because King didn't want to be labeled as a socialist, he did a kind of like political bamboozling, right? Um, and he introduced these reforms like one at a time mostly, right? And he didn't quite call them things that would make him labeled a commie by the conservatives. And so in the last year of the war, he introduced the most Canadian of government checks, right, which is the family allowance. And um, he did still uh, he
Just call him Vin Diesel because it's all
yeah,
about family.
but it had some limitations to it, right? I'm making it sound like, no, it was a land of like all roses and sunshine, right? And everyone had access to insurance. It's like, no. Um,
No.
he was not, we'll say, an overly enlightened Christian, right? So
Yeah.
European Jews and Japanese Canadians, for example, didn't fare particularly well in wartime Canada, right?
Shocker.
Yeah, so they were not necessarily the ones who the insurance schemes and employment like fair practices and all of that didn't necessarily apply to them, right?
Yeah.
Um, so he did argue for a baby bonus, for example, to mothers. But he also said at the same time that, quote, I thought the creator intended that all persons intended uh, yeah, I thought that the creator intended that all persons born should have equal opportunities, yet at the same time, he was interning Japanese Canadians. So,
Oof.
yeah, not fantastic. And I do actually plan, I did actually do a like brief solo episode on Japanese Canadians a while back. So you can check that out if you want to know more. Um, so, um, yeah, one of the books that I read stated it plainly, right? Mackenzie King was a racist and he
Yes.
had no women in his cabinet. But at the same time, he was doing more than simply honoring his own, right? He did recognize that some people needed help, right? And that mothers in Canada could not afford to feed and clothe their children, right, at this time. And so that's where the logic of some kind of baby bonus emerged, right? Um, that's not to excuse some of the like heinous stuff that he did do. But you do see like some kind of recognition of a better future for some people,
Hmm.
despite not going as far as we would like to necessarily, um, or being downright racist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we're getting on in time here, so let's see what we can move on to.
I
Uh,
mean,
Go ahead.
so because we're gonna have some more conscription we're coming back to.
Yeah, we're just coming back to the war. I made like a brief detour through like social programs, but let's go
Well,
back to the war.
I think it's important to note that the social programs are much more
Yes,
longer lasting than his war efforts.
yes, good. Yeah, I made a brief detour because it extends from it, but
Yeah.
absolutely the social programs are his defining legacy, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, so, okay, obviously the war is, we don't know it yet, but it's kind of like winding down by by 1944, right? The Allied forces invaded France on June 6th, right, of that year. Um, and Canadian soldiers were really at the forefront of a lot of these. They were leading their allies northward, except when it was time to enter a large city, at which point U.S. troops would be like jeeped ahead to meet the photographers. So that's cool. Nice bit of PR there.
Yeah.
Um, I'm making a bit of a joke here, but still. Um, and by September of 1944, something really interesting happens, right? Um,
Honestly, if I'm looking at why his like conscription or whatever, his opposition,
yeah.
I think part of it truly did just boil down to like a very basic moral principle of I gave my word.
Yes. Yeah.
I
The
think we
dude,
can we could try and think but like this man feels like he's very much like, no, I take somebody at their word and I hold them to like that.
he's very trusting in many ways.
Yeah. And I
For
think
someone
that
who
this
who talks to
became one of
ghosts.
our yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
I don't know. I think we like it's yeah, there probably are lots of complicated motivations and reasonings, blah blah blah. But I think at the end of the day, it was very just a simple thing of like I said I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I made a promise that I would not do this, and I want to avoid that promise as much as I can, or I want to keep that promise for as long as I can.
exactly. Right. And he did try, I think.
Yeah.
So in September of 1944, there's a well-known meeting that takes place between King, Winston Churchill, and Roosevelt, right, FDR, and it
Mhm.
happens in Quebec City. And they had met before, right, in 1943 to plot an invasion, and now they had to start talking about the most practical way to handle the defeated people and the liberated lands, right, of Europe,
Yeah.
because they were aware that it was kind of winding down.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring up this meeting is that while King was there, right, and it was taking place in Canada, um, it's very clear from documents at the time that King was not really a part of this triumvirate, right? This was a meeting between Roosevelt and Churchill where King was also there, right? And it does kind of show that the dynamics happening here are still very emblematic of the situation of the time, right?
Yeah.
Canada is on its way up on the international stage,
But
but it's not running the show.
no, it never will be.
No,
That's not what our country is. We don't like, yeah, we just don't have the it factor for it.
but it keeps trying to. That's the thing. Like King really wants it to, right?
Yeah.
And at this time, people still believe that it is a possibility. And I think this meeting was a bit of a wake up call for King. That's like, oh no, okay, FDR really wants to run the show now, and he kind of will.
Yeah.
um, you know, so it is an interesting meeting to take place to consider in greater depth, right? Of how the Brits and the Americans would kind of separate up going forward, right? Who would police the globe? And of course, history tells us that it's the Americans that would kind of take over the second half of the 20th century more than anything.
Hmm.
Um, but it was still like up for conversation at this point, and that's really a fascinating moment, right? Um, and King was already starting to think of like a post-war election and trying to use his time in Quebec to assure his members and their constituencies that the volunteer army could basically do the mopping up, right? That's all
Yeah.
we're going to be doing. Um,
Yeah. We're not going to be leading the charge.
his ministers of defense would have another story to tell, right? Even if it was towards the end of the war, right? And specifically, his Minister of Defense, Colonel Ralston, came back to Ottawa and informed the cabinet that the Canadian Army was terribly undermanned, right? The replacements were not enough, and the ones who did get to the theater of war were not trained well enough. Okay? So he was seeing a more apocalyptic vision, right? That we're sending these men over just to die, right?
Hmm.
Um, and to be fair, right, he heard it directly from the horse's mouth, right? He had been there, right? Or he had heard from the soldiers, right? That they needed help. And he tried to take that
Hmm.
seriously. Um, and so King replied that, like, okay, well, formally I have to take this to Parliament, right? And that if I do actually put in conscription, right, because the bill that had passed earlier was just that they were allowed to pass it. it's not that it was necessarily immediately passed, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so, King was like, fuck, okay, well, I guess I have to take this to Parliament. And I know that it's going to cause a crisis, but let's do it, right? At
Yeah.
this point, Ralston reminded King that in 1942, he had said, like, conscription if necessary. Now it was necessary, according to Ralston. So,
Yeah.
of course, this began to split in two, right? The cabinet and caused all kinds of all kinds of debates. And I'm kind of skipping over some things just because I know
We don't have the time.
we
We
don't
do
have the
not need to
time.
be. We do not have
And
the time for bureaucracy.
yeah, but I like this story, right? So on Halloween night, King summoned General MacNaughton to the Laurier House. And MacNaughton had been in charge of the overseas Canadian Army until the British High Command had insisted on his removal, right, just before D-Day. But now, and I like this story just because it takes place on Halloween, um, in the middle of what is supposedly the spookiest night of the year, right? The prime minister asked him to become the new minister of defense, right, to replace Ralston,
Mhm.
who King felt had become a little bit too much of a hothead and unruly. Um, and King pulled a bit of a sneaky one because the next day, um, King went to his cabinet meeting with a letter of resignation from Ralston, but one that Ralston had written 2 years prior. It's just
Yeah.
that King had never accepted it.
Yeah.
Right? He had just never accepted. He's like, no, I don't accept your resignation. You're still going to work for me until it's no longer useful for me to have you around. And now
Thing
two
is,
years
that's a very
later,
common political tool.
yeah, it's no
Like
longer use. Yeah,
there's always a drawer sitting somewhere with a letter of resignation just in case.
exactly. And so King pulled a fast one on Ralston and basically booted him, replacing him with McNaughton. Um, so
Um,
yeah, go
so
ahead.
funny connection.
Yes.
I think this General AGL McNaughton, I think he went to my high school.
No kidding.
I think
You just
I
looked
because
him up?
I no, because I was in McNaughton House.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, hold on. Let's look this up real quick. Um, Andrew McNaughton. So he was a professor of engineering at uh he was in Northwest
So where was he?
Territories.
He was a student at Bishop's College School.
Oh
Motherfucker.
my God, that's so cool.
Yep.
Yet
Yeah.
another
He
one.
was. Yeah. So I lived in the house that was named after him.
Oh, nice. That's
I went
really
to a very
cool.
fancy school.
Yeah. Damn. We so basically this show is basically becoming a lineage of people that you have like 2 degrees of separation from.
I mean, going back to Michael and Dachi,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Yeah. So you're the ultimate postmodern subject. Is that what you're saying?
I am not a teacher.
um, so of course, right, this would only like amplify the whole crisis. Um, and basically it culminated in a bunch of speeches and backstabbing and figures becoming ones of derision. And late in November, the Army Council, which is made up of the top command in the armed services in Canada, delivered an ultimatum to the cabinet and the prime minister. It's like, okay, we've got to stop talking about this. Right? Either they go overseas or we resign. Right? Um, and Mackenzie King was like, okay, I know that it's now necessary. Right? Even if we're
But
at
I
the
hate
end of the
it.
war, but I hate it, and I need to keep this a secret. Right? I can't let people know that this house is collapsing in on itself, right? Because it will completely make them lose faith at a time when they cannot lose faith. Um, and also because Canada must never catch a glimpse of itself as like any kind of military dictatorship. So let's try to avoid
Yeah.
that as much as possible. Um, so um, yeah, basically, the Liberal caucus and all of Parliament were very shocked to hear that the Prime Minister was now a conscriptionist. And this, of course, unleashed a wave of anarchy in Quebec, right? Because, of course, we were. Um, so, despite Saint Laurent's attempts to kind of appease the Quebec MPs, um, there were riots that occurred in the streets of Quebec and Montreal,
Shocker.
and mobs vandalized Saint Laurent's house, which is, a long-standing Quebec tradition of vandalizing our politicians' homes. So that's cool.
Putting bombs in their mailboxes and keeping dudes in trunks of cars.
Yeah, so, it didn't go down quite well, but it went down well enough that, it ultimately paid off, and about 16,000 um, people who had not volunteered originally, which were rightly called zombies in Canada, were hauled overseas, and suddenly thousands of people in Canada were unable to be found. So we don't know what happened to them, but they just disappeared, and the government was never able to find them. We assume they
Hmm.
disappeared into the woods, but who knows, right? But
So that's another fun story. I want to say my grandfather's family actually had people that like they were like helping shelter out in the woods.
shit. Okay, so that joke of like in the woods is actually a thing.
Yeah, yeah, like it was actually a thing of like because you gotta remember it's the Eastern Townships and it was the Eastern Townships was a very
Yeah,
undeveloped area at the time.
that's really interesting.
So I'm pretty sure
Oh,
we fully had like draft dodgers running around in the woods.
if it was at that time, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Huh.
Was it that one or was it Vietnam? I can't remember which one specifically.
Okay, yeah. But
Americans dodging draft. But I think
yeah,
it
so
was
I was gonna
both.
say, yeah, it would
I
have been
think it was
Americans
both.
at the time.
It would have been both.
Huh. Cool. Good for
Yeah,
them.
again, my family lots of connections in World War II. I don't know if I don't think we helped anybody dodge, but like we there are stories of like my grandfather seeing people running around in the woods.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. I don't know many stories from my grandfather. I know he went to the, I know he was part of the war, but he
I mean, I
he
have
was,
other stories about my grandfather, but those involve mobsters, so like
yeah, my grandfather apparently never talked about the war. That was,
mm,
yeah, he was just, there are two kinds of men in my family apparently on that side, where it's like you either talk a lot about it or you don't talk about it at all.
yeah.
And my grandfather was apparent, I've never met him, but apparently he was one of those people who never talked about it. So,
Hmm.
which fair enough. I totally understand. Although my great uncle, his brother, was at D-Day apparently, and he was one
Oh
of the,
yeah.
yeah, he was one of the people who wouldn't shut up about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you would. If you survive D-Day, I can absolutely understand why you would not shut up about it. Yeah. Um, so um, now that we're okay, let's go a little bit past the war here and kind of wind down, forgivably. Um,
Yeah. Well, because again, Canada's was part of the war, very important, blah blah blah, but
yeah,
like we weren't the war. We weren't the story.
no, we have a few like major standouts, right? Isn't it Leo Major,
Yeah.
who's like the major, the classic or whatever, of a French Canadian just like liberating entire towns on his own or something. He's like the Canadian Rambo.
Vive le Québec!
Yeah, exactly. Just like making little Quebecois colonies all throughout Europe. Um, so in the as we're coming out of the war, a lot of like changes are happening, right? Roosevelt had started his fourth term in January, but he died in May, right, of that year. Churchill resigned that same month and surprised himself by losing the resultant elections. The heads of state in Germany and Italy had been shot to death. It looked like Joseph Stalin, surprisingly, was going to win another re-election. Who knew about that one? Right?
Shocker.
Yeah,
All his
shocker.
opponents had been disappeared.
um, and it's kind of fascinating again as a moment in history where it would seem that Mackenzie King was the only one, at least in the Western world, that would stay in power through and after the Second World War, right?
Mm,
Um, and again, all he had to worry about was, you know, what to do after the war, right? Not only on the
yeah.
Quebec front, but also just now what, right? We just went through arguably the most traumatic experience of the of the 20th century, and
Yeah.
we kind of have to build a future after that. So now what?
And we don't want to do another fucking Great Depression.
Of course, right? Exactly. Um, so yeah, basically, let's see. What am I? Where would I want it to go from there? Yeah. Um, they did do another election, right, immediately after the war, and Mackenzie King had a lot of fun talking about the progressive conservative, um, what's his
The
name?
PCP.
The PCP, yeah, the progressive conservative candidate. That's the word I was looking for, whose name was John Bracken. Um,
Bracken.
and you know, this was still like um, this was still towards the end of the war, but Bracken had been an outspoken conscriptionist, and now he wanted to send more conscripts to the Pacific Theater, which was not quite done with. Um, King spent a lot of his time joking about Bracken and promising to expand even further the social benefits that he had been enacting during the war.
Hmm.
And he always, coincidentally, during his campaign, found the time to talk about showing the nation's thanks to its returned veterans, right? So he's firing on all
Cool.
cylinders, right? Like uh, getting that veterans vote, getting that single mothers vote, getting that um, getting that anti-conservative vote, right? He's really going for it, and it worked out, right? The Liberals did get a safe majority,
Hmm.
but the Progressive Conservatives did get 67 seats, and the CCF got 28. Most of them actually in the West, right? So a bit of a reversal, yeah. Like the
Yeah,
CCF still had its stronghold in Western Canada at the time, right? Remember your heritage, Western Canada, as a bunch of socialists. Um,
that's right. Dirty Albertans with your
most of
dirty tar oil.
most of the things you like about the West is actually a product of, soft socialism. Just saying.
Soft. Doesn't have to be so soft, if you're really interested, you can make it as hard as you want.
Uh, no, I'm not continuing on this metaphor. Never mind. um, um, despite the fact that he had called upon the veteran vote, um, when it was actually counted down to its bare bones, the military vote was a very small portion of King's overall popularity. He had not been super popular with the military vote by the end of his career. I think
Yeah, that sounds about
mostly,
right.
yeah, I think mostly because of his like flip flopping during the war about conscription, right? And usually military men like decisive action, logically. And so he kind of lost a bit of favor at the end of the day in that. But it did secure him for long enough to kind of set up things going forward for a post war Canada, right?
Hmm.
So Canada was experiencing an economic boom at this time, along with some inevitable inflation, right? And of course, the Liberals followed in a long tradition of most politicians and took credit for all of it, right? For all of this economic prosperity that was clearly rising out of their great ideas. Um, and a lot of the wartime energy would be channeled by King into peacetime energy.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, he was starting to be an old man, right? He had been in
Yeah.
politics. He had been in politics for 20 years. No, more than that, like 25 years at the very least. Um, and it was time to kind of like wind down, right? He was not a young buck anymore who had like these highfalutin ideals of what he could do. He was just tired and wanted to coast long enough to get a successor in, right? Um, he actually did help set up the United Nations. Um, he had gone to San Francisco to help do that. Um, Famously, he didn't have much faith in that as an institution.
I like
Um,
him more and more.
yeah, he did. He hadn't had any faith in the League of Nations when it first started, and he didn't have any more faith in the United Nations. He had become a bit cynical with time. Um,
I mean, he's not wrong.
no, no, he's not wrong. Also see that despite his leanings towards some more liberal ideas, right, as we talked about with the social programs, he also in this time really starts to agree with the United States that world communism would be the greatest threat to ever exist on the face of this planet, right?
Hmm.
And so you really see the Canadian political and social sphere gearing up for the Cold War as well. This would really be solidified with the Guzenko affair, which no, we never made an episode about it, but we probably could. Where it was basically unveiled that there was a spy network, or at least Guzenko was a spy for the Soviet Union, right?
Yeah.
um, and he had infiltrated the Canadian political sphere.
Bum bum
And
bum.
so that single case really amped up like Cold War paranoia about what was possible, right? Like, it's full invasion of the body snatchers.
Hmm.
Communists are infiltrating everything, and we have to prepare for that. Um, and so in 1947, that same year of the Guzenko affair, um, you know, King made speeches denouncing communism as the most subtle of all evils, and he would be in the first meetings for the future North Atlantic Trade Organization, right? So all of this is really at the forefront of his mind.
Hmm.
Um, what's interesting about King is that, again, he would oversee a different kind of transition, which is more interesting for us, which is the cultural one. Right? As I mentioned, he would tie more and more of Canada to the US, and that means culturally. American radio stations, American movies, American music and television, and so on, right? Became
Listening to
more.
their rock and roll and wearing their blue jeans.
Just great. I like American rock and roll as much as the next person, right? But
But get some Russian there, goddammit.
no, but I mean, um,
Get some bare naked ladies.
get some bare naked ladies. Yeah, exactly. I think a person from 1947 would explode if they heard the bare naked ladies.
Heard one week, chickadee China, the Chinese chicken. Grab a drumstick.
It would just
If
their,
I had
their
$1 million,
mind would
buy craft dinner.
their mind would absolutely fry immediately.
Chickadee China, the Chinese chicken. Grab a chicken. Chicken.
so the so yeah, it's interesting that you do see this cultural shift, right? And for someone like King, who was so attached to Canada as a nation, it's fascinating to see that it's also in this time that a lot of Canadian nationalists would start to see the slow demise happening, Canadian culture and the Canadian nation, right? As it slowly pulled into the American orbit. Um, yeah, so
Hmm.
this is also as a kind of counterpoint to what I just said. Um, the King would remain in the British connection, broadly speaking, but at the same time also enact the Canadian Citizenship Act, which came into practice on January 1st, 1947. And 2 days later, King became the first Canadian citizen to receive a certificate. Right? So you do start to see this shift towards Canada as separate from the British, just as it's entering America territory. Right? So
Yeah.
fun times ahead. Um, and yeah, as again, one of the books I read said Canadian independence had been proclaimed over and over again for 80 years and would continue to be proclaimed for years to come. Right. So fun times. And the last thing that I would mention is that while he was no longer technically prime minister, right, by the time that it actually happened, it's under King that talks of integrating Newfoundland into Canada would happen, right? So those seeds are being sown already.
Hmm.
Um, that's going to be a whole other episode because it's a fascinating thing, right? I really think it's really interesting. Um, so that's a whole thing, but it's under King that this would begin.
Yeah.
But after all of this, right? Well, no, he wasn't in the First World War, but he was at least alive, right? After a major
Yeah.
world war, the oncoming,
Great Depression.
right, the whole nine
World War
yards, right?
II.
Um, the increase in civil service here in Canada. By 1948, he was tapped out.
He
And
steps down, not with a bang, but with a whimper.
actually, I think it was a pretty like notable thing. He went to the Liberal convention in 1948, and he voted himself out. Right, he voted for Saint Laurent as the new leader, and Saint Laurent would win, right, and would
Yep.
take over as head of the Liberal Party and eventually as head of Canada.
Woohoo!
Um, and yeah, he was a bit of a grumpy old man by the end of his life. So, he was very uh, again flip floppy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
One day he felt that the party was really ordained to run Canada forever, and the next day he felt that it was just tired old men running things in a way that didn't actually serve any purpose. Um, he was very pessimistic about the world that he was seeing emerge, right? And had no faith that the UN could forestall what he saw was going to be the biggest war of them all, which is nuclear annihilation.
Mhm.
Um, and he probably died thinking that as well, right? Because right when he died in 1950, we were on the eve of the Korean War. Um, you know, he died on the night of July 22nd, 1950, next to his dog. And just not long after, right, the army uniforms in Korea were starting to appear on television. So
Mm.
probably, as far as he was concerned, we were headed for nuclear annihilation, which is kind of a sour note to end on, but a really interesting picture, I think, of the man.
I also think it's interesting just because it highlights very much what it means to live and be Canadian.
Say more.
This what's this idea like nuclear annihilation, fear of America, like these are all the defining traits of Canada really in the 20th and 21st century.
Yeah.
By just general geographic proximity, this is our lot in life. You know, talking about the United Nations, yeah, we're part of the G8. That's really, or the G7 now. That's really cool. That's really great. Still not part of the Security Council. We don't really have a say at the table.
Yeah. Yeah. See what you mean.
And we are always like, we're always sort of there, but never then very well respected or treated as a actual power in any way. We're just expected. And so you can sort of see in King's musings and his feelings on the subject, he was kind of summing up, he was very much setting up the identity of Canadianism for the next 100
Yes.
years now.
Yes. Absolutely. Anything else you want to say about it? For this was a long episode.
I think we just wrap up with our ranking.
Cool. Based on everything we've said so far, where would you go
He
with him?
oh boy, he's at least top three.
You would
Like
put
you
top
have
three.
you
So our top
yeah.
three so far is McDonald, Laurier, and Borden.
Really, we put Borden that high.
Yeah, well, comparing to the others, fuck, we have
That's true.
Alexander
Mackenzie,
Mackenzie, Mackenzie Bowell, S.G. Thompson, S.D. Thompson,
Bennett.
Abbott, Tupper, and Bennett, and Meehan at the bottom.
Yeah. No, I definitely think he's top three. So
Mm.
it's him. It's McDonald, Laurier, him.
So you would put him above Borden, yeah.
Yes, I don't think you can make an argument to put him below Borden.
Yeah, I, c- because as far as like wartime prime ministers are concerned, I would put them pretty similar. You do see a lot of
Yeah,
similar
but I think again
actions,
that thing we were talking about, like Borden didn't set the tone for Canadian nationality in the 20th century.
votes. He increased the vote for both men and women.
But I mean more in like a cultural sense, like this idea, like that these speeches that King was giving, it's much more, it's stronger.
I can see that.
Like
I can see that.
I just again, we don't talk about him in the same way.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Okay, fine.
I
I'll
don't know if I'd
accept.
put him. I don't. I, mm, I think there is an argument to be made of putting him above Laurier, but I don't think I'm the
Ooh,
person to make that argument.
ooh. No, but think through that. Why would you? What would be the argument there? Like, what makes you possibly hesitate?
I think it's just more about the challenges that he faced. A lot of Laurier's challenges that he faced, Laurier kind of made the challenges for himself to solve.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Meanwhile, King had to solve, in much the same way that MacDonald had to solve challenges from external forces.
Hmm.
King had to do a lot of the same. Like internally, Laurier probably did a lot more, but
Yes,
King had to sort of like he had no control over the war popping up
that is
or the
true.
great the press.
Yeah,
Like these are things that just happened, and King had to react
yeah,
on the spot
yeah,
to
yeah.
that, while also
Although,
keeping the nation together, sending out troops, like all these different little parts and pieces.
yeah, he did. Yeah, Laurier was much more important as far as like Canada and U.S. relations, right? I would
Mm.
say, or at least in negotiating those in a way that were satisfactory for the time. Um, and I think I would only put Laurier above King for one reason is that he seems more firm in his vision,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah, King is a little wishy-washy.
Yeah, yeah. He was willing to compromise, and that's fine in its own right, right? Um, excuse me. But I think Laurier deserves some credit just for being a little bit more willing to stick to his guns type of thing.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe that's a wrong perception to have, but that seems to be the case for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so number three.
Yeah, I think a strong number three, contention for second.
Okay.
Honestly, I think in those top three, McDonald, Laurier, and King,
Yeah.
people would order them any which way, and you could almost sort of like I could see any sort of
Yeah.
that top three shaking out anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think consistently in most like polls that they've done about it, I think consistently King is at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see why.
Yeah, and you could understand why, like what he did, what he shaped, what he sort of
Hmm.
the because again, McDonald when yeah, McDonald did Confederation, that's great and all,
Sure.
but like Confederation was bound to happen really. Like it was a
It was already a discussion. Yeah.
yeah. Whereas again, King literally got dropped off with a fucking war. Here's World
Here.
War II. What are you gonna do? How are you gonna figure it out? Here's the conscription argument again. Here's
Yeah.
the this, here's the that, and also we're still recovering economically.
Yeah. Here's the worst economic crisis that the world has ever faced, and here's the worst war that the world has ever faced. Figure it out, you dipshit.
Figure it out, and you still have to keep the Anglophones and the Francophones from killing each other.
Never mind about the Japanese. We won't talk about them.
Or the Jews.
Or women. Yeah. But you can talk to your dead mom anytime. That's pretty cool.
So yeah, I think I get why people would. I think as far as our list is concerned, since our list does take that bit more of a cultural
Yeah.
viewpoint, I think
Yeah.
he still shakes out to third.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I think he's open enough to Americanization that that would put him a bit lower.
But who's ready for Trudeau fever, baby?
Oh God, I can't wait. I can't
I
wait.
can feel it coming in my
Oh
body.
God damn.
Phrasing, but also
Oh fuck. It's gonna be so good. I can't wait to
Trudeau mania.
snort Trudeau right into my veins.
Just raw Cuban Trudeau.
Yeah. Especially that like I know for a fact that our next prime minister is gonna be boring as a bag of nails.
But again, like King was kind of right. The liberals did dominate, have been dominating
Yep.
politics ever since World War II.
By far. By far. Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
it's been the conservatives are to lose so badly that when they have a surefire win, they still fucking fumble the bag.
They lose so badly that they have to completely reorganize themselves as a party every few years.
They lose so badly that their only way of winning is by turning the liberals into conservatives.
Oh, that's a accurate but brutal take right there.
Boom, roast.
I think that's the only thing that you can end on.
Yeah.
Thank you
So,
for listening, everybody.
listening.
Go ahead.
Thank you for listening, everybody. We're glad you tuned in. Sorry that this one's long, rambling, confusing, all over the place. Not our best work, but like it's
Uh,
11:30 at night.
I think it is our best work. Our best work is the
Yeah.
rambling stuff. It's the one where we get the most
Listen,
positive
just like
feedback.
King, we were doing our best at the situation that we got.
Yep. And sorry for taking a month to release an episode.
Whoopsies.
It happens.
Superman would not be proud of us.
Anyway, thanks for listening. Support us on Patreon if you want to. Shoot us a couple of bucks. If not, just send an email over saying what's up.
Mm.
That's it. That's all. Catch you all on the flip
Fascism
side.
is bad.
Yep. That's all. It's bad. Just don't fuck with it. Just don't. Or
Yeah.
fuck with it, but in the positive sense of like tearing it down, you know? Bunch of fascists. All right, that's it. Bye.
Bye.